Focus on your strengths. This is how most people drive the conversation their way, and this is regardless of the seniority or the job role that you're applying for. And with one notable exception, when you're not technically fit for that job, this will always work at a company of high performers such as Amazon. Now, how do you achieve this without being a genius or some incredible storyteller? Well, throughout this video, I'm going to share with you 5 pieces of advice on how you can communicate on your strengths and core competencies more effectively. So the first piece of advice here would be also probably the most boring of them all, that is to properly keyword your CV. And the reason why I'm saying this is important today and probably even more than before is because companies use more and more software to automate the CV screening round, and it's inevitable that you'll be screened on the keywords displayed on your CV. Now also recruiters have a certain type of bias to scan CVs faster, so it can only work to your advantage if you keyword your CV properly, and especially for US roles, it's all about selling yourself. So unless you have a properly keyworded CV, you risk of having someone else get your spot, especially for the screening round. And also something that you may not know if you're preparing for the loop is that in some cases they do allow you to have a fresh CV to present them for the loop. So just double check this with your main point of contact if this is the case. Now, number 4 here would be, don't just prepare answers to questions, because I know people tend to do, for instance, 2 examples for each of the 14 leadership principles, or they prepare answers for the 35 most asked behavioral question, which is fine. But the mindset that you should be in is to exploit gifts. Like there are gift questions and there are complex questions. For example, when they ask you why Amazon, that's a gift because you can prepare that well in advance and you'll always use that answer, right? So make sure that you as I said in the beginning of the video, focus on your strengths throughout the video and what's in for them, but also what's in for you. Now also when they ask you what are your strengths, it's another gift question. Or tell me about the time when you showed customer obsession and ownership. These are all gift questions. So basically what's not a gift question is to talk about time when you failed, or you tell me about your weakness or a challenging situation. So whenever you're receiving a gift question, make sure that you understand that's a gift they give you and to exploit it as good as you can. So number 3 here with respect to how to drive the conversation your way. It's a somewhat more advanced trick here, and I'm assuming that you already went through behavioral interviewing and you're pretty good at answering, you feel comfortable at answering pretty much any question. And also given the fact that I covered in my previous videos many of the behavioral questions, and there's a lot of information available out there. For some of you it might look like, okay, but how can I go a step further for here and really ensure that I will drive the conversation my way? What can I do within this regard? And one possible technique here is, while answering questions, if you're really comfortable answering them, try to omit, try to forget key details from that question, such as some metrics in the beginning. Don't say I worked at company XYZ, just say while working as a project manager running a team of people. And don't say the metrics there, make them curious, invite them to ask you questions. And it's very hard for me to tell you exactly what you should omit for the question, because that from the answer, because that depends on role by role, and that depends on how comfortable are you to communicate an answer. Just keep in mind, you can intentionally omit information that would automatically trigger their curiosity to ask you for a follow-up question. And I also cover the follow-up questions, all the possible follow-up questions that they are trained for in my previous videos. So by looking at both the possible follow-up questions and the information that you want to communicate with your answer, you can identify elements that you could omit intentionally from your answer just in order to drive the conversation your way. So this is a very powerful way that you could you could almost certainly ensure that not only the conversation will drive your way, but there will be a significant amount of time spent on you scoring points on this same topic. Now, the next piece of advice refers to ending on a positive note. And the reason why I'm saying this is, I believe it's pretty obvious, because you want them to ask you follow-up questions on that same positive note and drive the conversation in a positive context, not in a sad one, not in a downwards trend. Now, why am I saying this? Well, it's because I know that many of you who are really good at answering behavioral questions have a tendency to develop too much on the results part of a story. And especially, for example, for the failure stories, where you present pretty concisely the situation, then you also coherently talk about your failure, but then you go on and talk about your results for 1 minute or even 2 minutes in some instances. And this is not that great, because the balance between these sequences in the case of a failure story should be more like 1 sentence to situation, 2 sentences for the failure, and 3 sentences for the learnings, but not more, because if you do it more, then you have a tendency to sound boring. You see, you will look like you're not capable of synthesizing the correct amount of information, and you're going to be a lot more likely to fail to transmit energy and to show curiosity with your answers. So long as you keep your answers concise and you ensure that the results part of your story is fine, I believe you are on the right track to ensure that you will always end on a positive note. And my last piece of advice here, which is pretty important, is to always look up who will be interviewing you. Look up their LinkedIn profiles, look up for more information about them, and in some cases people don't even know who they will be interviewing with, and they know they could ask, but they don't ask this. And what happens is that many times you don't know whether your second phone interview will be with a technical person or not, or I should say probably the first phone interview is with a technical person or not. And that's a huge difference, because you prepare the behavioral questions for 1 week, let's say, and you prepare them for a technical audience, and then your audience will have nothing in common with those answers, so they won't understand anything from what you say, right? So there's also the vice versa thing. But not only that, also during the loop, if you look up your interviewers panel on LinkedIn, you'll find some information for their background, and you'll be able to relate to them. You'll be able to use wording that makes it easier to relate to them, to speak their language, and the better you talk their language, the better your chances to be perceived as putting together a great show, which is actually your end goal, especially for US roles. So these were my 5 pieces of advice when it comes to maximizing the probability that the conversation will run the way you want during the Amazon interview. And as always, I hope you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.